And yeah, I think it may, well, I've known lots of people in the military. I think it may be my first time working with people in the military, but I've been briefed by the dean and by Jim. And this is an interesting one for me for a couple of reasons. The first one is this is my first live in-person talk in about 18 months. I've spent the last 18 months on Zoom. So you're literally my first audience in over a year. But here's the second thing that's interesting is you're all wearing masks, which means I can't tell if you're yawning. Now, we're in the after lunch slot, which is renowned for yawning. So can you do me a favor? If you're getting bored, can you just make it really obvious, like just make it really obvious to me so I know to stay on my game. You all right with that? All right. Oh, by the way, we'll be using this convention. This is yes. This is no. This is what the hell are you talking about? So can you just do that for me? This yes, no. What okay, mostly for my amusement. Okay. So let's see where to begin. Oh, well, here's the other thing. As Jim and the dean were preparing me, what I understood was that for the EQ session, this was the session that the civilian staff were going to enjoy the most, but that the strategy session was the one that the military staff would enjoy the most. And I know it's the beginning of term, and Jim said, you know, the military staff, they'll probably be checking their watches during your session, so don't worry about that. So my goal is to have this session be equally useful and engaging and interesting to all of you. So that's my plan. So let me get a sip of water. That's my plan. So let's see where to begin. A couple of things. First thing is most teaching that we've learned to have is what I would call outside-in education. And the way that works is you've got your conceptual models, like which you've spent a whole lifetime developing, right? An understanding of how the world works, what's important, all that sort of stuff. And then a speaker like me or Daryl or Benedetta comes along and gives you pieces of information. And you evaluate that information based on your existing framework, and you decide some of it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense, I'll let that in. Oh, that's a good idea, I'll hang on to that. No, that's stupid, I'll leave that where it is. So it's what I call an outside-in model of learning. What we're going to be doing for the next, well, kind of the next hour and a half, actually, and maybe a little longer, because I've got the 45 minutes now for the main presentation. Then we've got some Q&A, and then we're going to do a team building exercise. So we've got a chunk of time. And my objective this afternoon is to do something completely different. See, and this is going to be a strange thing for a speaker to say, but what I'm going to suggest is that there's virtually nothing that I'm going to say that's going to be much use to you. The things that are going to be useful to you are going to come from within you. So here's my assertion. Here's my first assertion. I'm going to make a ton of, oh, this is important. I'm going to make a ton of assertions over the next couple of hours. And I don't want you to believe me. I don't want you to believe what I'm saying. Rather, I invite you to evaluate it against your own experience, try it out in your own life, test it out in your own world, and make up your own mind. I'm working on the basis that there's some stuff that's true that you can see for yourself. And if you see it, it can do something for you. But it's up to you to find it. So my premise is that you and me and everyone you know, everyone on this planet, has within them a source of clarity, resilience, realization, transformation, wisdom, creativity. That source is already there within you and already there within everyone. And by the end of this session, you'll have had examples for yourself. But my goal and my job is to help create the conditions for that knowledge, that awareness, that realization to come more fully into your experience. And so I want to give you an example of this. And this is an example that some of you will already know, and some of you, all of you will have seen this. Some of you may have experienced this. And so if we can, Ernesto, if you can put up the first slide in the presentation. Now, this is an old management consulting thing. Some of you know this, some of you don't. But has everyone seen this image before? Okay. Put your hand, pardon me. Put your hand up if you can already see the large white arrow in the image. So look around. Now listen. Now if the person next to you can't see it yet, just help them out with it. Here, I'll help you. It's between the E and the X. Now, can you hear the laughter? That's the sound of realization. So can anyone not see it yet? Just put up your hands so I can see. Can anyone not see it yet? Okay, what about the spoon, poetically concealed in the word fed? You see that? So here's what I'm going to suggest to you. So let's just take a step back for a moment. The fact that we're here today means that we've evolved from a long line of creatures. Oh, by the way, I'm Jamie. It's lovely to be here with you. I'll give you a bit of my backstory and that sort of thing. I just wanted to kind of lay the table, so to speak. So the fact that we're here today means we've evolved from a long line of creatures over millions and millions of years, every single one of whom has managed to survive until breeding age, have sex at least once, and give rise to a progeny who did the same, and that's happened over and over and over and over again for millions of years on this planet that sometimes is very inhospitable, and for most of which we didn't have iPhones or cars or central heating or any of that stuff. And yet we're here, and we're here because our ancestors managed to survive and thrive and prosper on this sometimes inhospitable planet. See, most creatures get eaten or die before they reach breeding age, like 90% of them. So in a very literal way, we're the leading edge of evolution. You and me and everyone you know. I know some of us may not look like it or act like it, but we are. So which gets us where? Which gets us to this. I'm working on the basis that your ability to go from not seeing that white arrow to seeing it is a function of an innate capacity, which is your capacity for realization, which I mean in a very specific way. It's your ability to bring your perceptions more closely into alignment with reality. Now, the epistemologist Gregory Bateson said that the biggest problems in the world are the result of the difference between the way nature already works and the way people think. So you can literally see the progress of the evolution of our knowledge as a process of closing the gap between how the world already works and how we think it works. Like we used to believe that the sun went around the earth. Oh no. It works the other way around. We used to believe that the earth was flat. Oh no, it's a sphere. We used to believe that infection was caused by bad smells and atmospheres. Oh no, there's these things called germs. So literally our evolution as a species has been a process of closing the gap between how life already works and the way we think. And so the capacity that closes that gap is your innate capacity for realization, your ability to bring your understanding of the world even more closely into alignment with reality. And so that's what I want to have happen today. I've got some stuff that I'm going to share with you relating to resilience, relating to mental clarity, relating to stress, relating to well-being, relating to connection and love and consensus. And I'm going to suggest that it's there to be seen. It's there to be seen. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do. I want you to, well, I'll tell you a story first. So, well, I'll give you a little bit of my background, actually. So I used to work as a project manager, program manager, doing organizational change programs, software programs, that sort of thing. And I became interested in how people change and how organizations change. And I went on a training course about that, and I ended up quitting my job and doing what I do now. And then about 10 years into it, I started exploring the stuff that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And someone was coaching me. I was talking to Jim about this earlier. Someone was coaching me, and he said, Jamie, he said, I don't know how to tell you this. He said, but you could really do with an upgrade in your listening. And I was like, at the time, I had trained in body language and linguistics and eye movement, so I could literally play back the last 30 seconds of what he'd said, complete with all the tonalities and gestures and that sort of thing. So I thought it was funny. He didn't know that. I was like, tell me how I could be a better listener. I'm all ears. And he said, well, it seems like when you're listening to me, it seems like you've got a lot on your mind. It seems like you're listening hard. Well, he was right. I did. I was thinking a lot while I was listening to him. And he said, no, what I want to introduce you to is a different way of listening. I want to introduce you to how you listened before you knew what the word listening meant. I'll give you to think about it. Like, check this out. Touch your nose. Just go like that. Go, this is my nose. I literally do it. It works better if you do it. So that's an amazing accomplishment. Here's why. When you were born, you didn't know how to do that. You didn't even know you had a hand. You didn't know any of that. But in the first months and years of life, you created a really richly detailed map of yourself and your body and your world and the other people around you. And you didn't even know you were doing it. You learned to talk, and you don't even know how you did. No one taught you to talk. You learned how to talk, and you learned because you were listening. You were listening to life and learning from life, from the impact of life. Now, it's not to say that there isn't huge advantage to outside-in learning. There's some stuff that I feel ever so grateful to have learned like that. But what I want to suggest is that you have a capacity for insight and realization, and one of the ways you can avail yourself of it is by listening. See, most people, I've worked with thousands of groups around the world, and most people, if you ask them, how good of a listener are you? People will say, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like an 8 or a 9. Who's an 8 or a 9? Almost everyone self-reports being about an 8 or a 9. But in reality, as you probably know, most other people are horrible listeners. Like, you're good, but everyone else, they're terrible at it. Well, I'm going to invite you to do a quick exercise. So just find someone near you, and you're going to ask them a question, and then I just want you to listen. But here's the thing. When you're listening, you see a lot of people, when they're listening, they're waiting for their turn to talk. And I want you to give the person you're with the gift of just being listened to. And so when you're here's a tip. When you're listening to them, you can listen to them. You know how, like, if you're listening to something on the radio, or listening to a song, or listening to eavesdropping on someone in the dentist's office or something, you're not really waiting for your turn to talk. You're just like relaxed, hanging out, having a listen. I want you to experiment with that. So you're going to ask the person this question. It's a very simple question. I've asked this of thousands of people around the world. The question is, when do you get your best ideas? So you're going to ask the person this question, and then you're just going to listen to them for 1 minute. And then you're going to swap over. Just ask that question. When do you get your best ideas? And then allow yourself to be bathed in their answers. So go for it. Do that now. I'll tell you when 2 minutes is up. Do a minute and then swap over. Ernesto, can we lose the slide? Ernesto, can we just lose the slide? Thanks. All right, that's about 2 minutes. So let's all get back together in one group. Just shout out for me, when do you get your, by the way, I've done this with literally asked thousands and thousands of people over the years. When do you get your best ideas? On the loo? Exercising? Wait, shout so I can hear you. In the shower? Gardening? During breakfast? Driving a car? Swimming? Cycling? Relaxed? What was that? In airplanes. Funny, me too, especially before they take off. I don't know why. Well, I do, but it was strange until I did. So like I said, I've asked thousands of people this question. Top 3 answers: in the shower, traveling to and from work, on holiday. Always, almost always in situations where the person's not thinking about the thing that they're trying to figure out. And all that's happening is when we have a capacity for insight and realization, and it arrives when our mind is relatively at rest, when we're not preoccupied, when we're doing something else, when we're in the flow of doing something else. And it's funny, there's a book called Strategic Intuition by a guy called William Duggan, who's got I think the chair for management studies at Columbia Business School. He wrote this book, and what he was looking for is what is it what's the source of strategic insight? So what he saw, he looked at everyone from the Netflix guys to the people who started like Apple and Microsoft to people like Napoleon and Clausewitz. And what he found in every case, there were 2 pieces to it. The first was they consumed a huge amount of data. So Napoleon, in the days before battles, would study maps and accounts of other battles and that sort of thing. And then at a certain point, he would just walk away from it. He'd, go to the pub or go for a walk or whatever. And then he'd have what he called a strike of the eye. He's like, I know what I'm going to do. He'd have an insight. He'd have a realization. He would see something that was already true, that was already possible. Same with, there's a story about Steve Jobs, the creator of Apple, or the co-founder of Apple. He was being interviewed after one of the big successes. I think this is his kind of comeback to Apple and the success of the Mac. And he was being interviewed about it, and the reporter said, "What are you going to do next?" And he said, "I don't know." And the reporter was flabbergasted because he's speaking to a strategic genius, right? He's like, "Well, what are you going to do about that?" And Jobs said, "I'm going to wait until I know. I'll wait until I know." And he used to, go out for walks and meditate and do what he knew to do to find his way into an insight-friendly space. And what came next was iTunes and iPods and the iPhone and Apple becoming the most profitable company on the planet at the time. So what I'm suggesting is that these examples I've given are examples where people had availed themselves of a capacity that we all have. We all have it, because if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be able to walk, you wouldn't be able to talk, you wouldn't be able to have learned to do any of the things that you do on a daily basis without even thinking about it, whether it's riding a bicycle or driving a car or anything like that. Like, who drives? Everyone here drive? A lot of people drive, whether you drive or ride a bicycle. If you're able to drive with fluency through traffic, that relies on a huge amount of embodied understanding about how the vehicle works, about your position on the road, all that sort of stuff. But you're not even thinking about it consciously. So it's what they call unconscious competence. Well, you go from having conscious competence to unconscious competence through insight and realization. That's how it happens. So you all have it. We all have it available to us. Which gets us where? Well, here's where it gets us. I told you I'd tell you my story. So I was doing personal development training and that sort of thing, working with companies and individuals, and built an educational business. And then I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek in 2007. And it said basically, get the secret to success and happiness in life is get your business running on autopilot and then go traveling around the world, having mini retirements, going on adventures for 3 or 4 months at a time. So I thought, that's it. That sounds like it. So I did that, and I went on my first mini retirement, which was a 3-month ski trip to Whistler in Canada. And as far as I was concerned, it was going to be amazing, because I would be feeling so successful and fulfilled and getting better at skiing, and I couldn't wait. But 6 weeks in, I was miserable, and I couldn't figure out why, because according to the rules of the game I'd been playing, I should be so happy, I should have white light shining out of every bit of me. Like, I should be super, super happy. But I wasn't, and I couldn't figure it out. So I went back to the drawing board, and I ended up hiring a coach. And he said, well, let's make a list of your goals and objectives. And so that was easy to do. All my goals and objectives were things like, health and money and ski holidays and this sort of stuff. And he said, well, let's go through your list and cross off anything that is predicated on the idea that you're going to be happier once you have that. So I did that, and then everything was off my list. And I had a huge realization, and the realization was, oh, everything you've been looking for outside of you is already there within you. Now this is shocking. Can we have the slide up, please? Next one, please, Ernesto. This one. So how many of you can tell, how many of you had a teddy bear or a security blanket when you were a kid? Great, great, great. Now here's the interesting thing. Teddy bear so a little kid has a teddy bear. And children have teddy bears or security blankets or whatever. They're called transitional objects for when they're going through certain stages in their development. And it genuinely seems to the child, like when they hold their teddy bear, they get a feeling of peacefulness and comfort and relaxation and security and safety. And it genuinely seems to the child like that's coming from the teddy bear, right? But actually, all of those feelings of well-being and security and comfort, they're coming from within the child. They're coming from within the child. And if you go on holiday and you forget your child's teddy bear, the child totally freaks out. They're losing, and they feel genuinely bereft, and it genuinely seems to them like that's coming from their lack of a teddy bear, right? And that seems real to them. But actually, all of that stuff's coming from within the child as well. And this is a 100% gig. Like, just to be really clear, 0% of those feelings of well-being and security and peace are coming from the teddy bear. I've ripped one open. There's nothing in it doing that. It's 0% is coming from there. 100% is coming from within the perceptual systems in the body of the child. 100%. Okay? It's being 100% created from within. Even the child's ability to perceive a teddy bear is being created from within. Now, I'm not saying you create your own reality. I'm pretty sure these cool boots were created by a bootmaker in England and not by me. But my moment-to-moment experience of this moment, of this room, of this body, of you, all of that's coming from within. And that's not even new. That was discovered by a guy called Hermann Helmholtz in the 1850s. He's like the great-granddaddy of neurology. And he was the first one who realized that our experience of the world is, it's a guess that we make. And you've had this. Have you ever been walking along and you see a friend walking towards you and you start waving at them, and then you realize it's not them as they get closer, and you ever had that? Yeah. Well, it's not like they were walking towards you and you're like, yeah, 50%, that's probably Steve. Hi. No, you saw Steve. And then as Steve got closer, you're like, oh, geez, that's not Steve. That's because your perceptual systems are making a guess about the world, moment to moment to moment. And you're experiencing it as real. And most of the time, it's a good guess. It's a good guess. It's good enough for you to be able to organize yourself in life and operate in the world. So it's a good guess. You're good at it. But you don't realize you're doing it. Like even right now. I find this one of the strangest things, even right now. So are you guys on board with me that it's 100% inside out when it comes to the teddy bear? Anyone reckon that it's 5% 95 or 20/80 or anything? Or are we 100%? Well, yes and no. Like, depending on the environment, you could give the child an Osama bin Laden doll, or a Saddam Hussein doll, or a Donald Trump doll, or a Joe Biden doll, or a Hillary Clinton doll. You can give them whatever doll they like because the child hasn't been enculturated at that point. And they'll be feeling a deep sense of peace and security with their Osama bin Laden doll under their arm. So, absolutely, culture, where we grow up in culture and environments, and absolutely. So, how often does it look different from 100% when it's the teddy bear of your job, or your colleagues, or your money, or your relationship, or your future, or your past, or your mother-in-law, or your car, or whatever. It sometimes looks different than 100%, doesn't it? But I'm saying something very hardcore. I'm saying that 100% of your experience of life is created from within. Now, I'm not saying that you can control that necessarily or anything like that, but what I am suggesting is that if you realize that for yourself, that's the doorway to freedom. So anyway, so I realized that. This is like 2009. I'm like, oh, everything you've been looking for outside of you is already there within you. Obviously not in terms of cool shoes, mountain bikes, and wristwatches, but in terms of the feelings of security, fulfillment, well-being, happiness, love, all that sort of stuff. It comes from within. Now, sometimes when I'm saying this, people will go, oh, if I believed that, I wouldn't want to do anything. It's like, no, it's the opposite. It frees you from the illusion of insecurity. Because what it means is that worry and stress and anxiety, which are totally normal systemic responses, but they are coming from within. They're almost never coming from the things we think about. It's so interesting. I've spoken to people in a variety of high-performance fields, ranging from sports to music and dancing to public speaking to I was speaking to Jim about this in terms of warfare and that sort of thing. And what we find is that when people are in the thick of it, they're not worried, they're not anxious, they're in a high-performance mode. And when people get worried, stressed, anxious, bothered, it's because, my assertion to you is it's because they're believing something that isn't real. I'll give you an example. I was coaching this guy. And he was stressed out of his mind, and it was interfering with his job, with his business, with his relationship, and constant worry about the future. And he said, I know I'm overthinking it. I know I shouldn't think so much, but I can't help it. I said, no, you should be overthinking. He's like, what? I said, yeah. Have you ever had that thing where you're walking around your house or your apartment at night and you see something like, well, you think it's an intruder, but it turns out to be like a coat on the back of a door or a lamp or something that wasn't there? Anyone had that? Yeah. So I said this to him, have you ever had that? He's like, yeah, I had it yesterday. I was like, oh, tell me about it. He said, well, I thought there was an intruder in the hallway outside my office, but it turned out it was just an ironing board that I'd leaned against the banister before I went in my office. I said, what happened when you thought there was an intruder? He said, oh, I was terrified. So my heart was racing, my mind was racing. I said, what happened the moment you realized it was an ironing board? He said, oh, relief, relief. I said, now how did you do that? How did you go from freaking out to relief? He said, well, I didn't do it, it just happened. I said, that's right. It happened. I said, when did it happen? He said, the moment I realized it was an ironing board. So again, we're back to that capacity for realization. My assertion to you is that the vast majority of what creates stress, worry, and anxiety for people is believing something that isn't true. Now, the believing something that isn't true is very, very specific. My assertion to you is that in any moment, you're living in the feeling of your internally generated perceptual realities. I'll give you an example. When I first came on stage to start talking to you guys, I had adrenaline running through my system, right? I'm guessing maybe it's like I'm a very comfortable public speaker. Maybe it's because it's the first time I've done a talk in 18 months. Maybe it's because it's the first time I've met you guys. I could make a long list of maybes. But the fact was, I was feeling adrenaline pumping through my system. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was in no danger whatsoever, that I'm just feeling something that's running through my system and it'll take its course. So nothing to worry about, nothing at all. But there wasn't anything I could do about it. Like it just had, we have this fight or flight system, which is built, every vertebrate has a fight or flight system. And its job, the fight or flight system, it's designed or created, or however you think about it, to save our hides once every 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours, and it can operate full on for 20 to 30 minutes with no problem at all. You can do that every day for life with no issues at all. And think about it, the average bunny rabbit, every day is like a war zone for a bunny rabbit, right? There are predators and that sort of thing. But bunny rabbits are renowned for being very chilled out. They don't smoke and drink. They don't have high medical bills. They're very, very chilled out creatures. They're eating carrots and having sex most of the time, as far as I understand. But they're in life-endangering peril on a regular basis, and they have a fight-or-flight system to save their backside when that happens. And my assertion to you is that if you or any of your friends or colleagues are experiencing ongoing stress of significant levels, it's because you're believing something that isn't true. Now, let me be clear. We all have challenges in life, get bad news, difficult situations, that sort of thing. And it's natural for us to sometimes get freaked out by them or that sort of thing. But the thing that creates perpetual or long-term stress and anxiety and worry is believing that your feelings of stress and worry and anxiety are coming from something other than the present moment, are coming from future events, are coming from other people, are coming from past experiences. And my bold claim is that in every moment, you are living in the moment-to-moment experience of your perceptual systems, creating a perceptual reality that appear to you to be real. We all kind of intuitively know this, right? Like, everyone I know who gets angry, the angrier they get, the more intelligent they think they are, right? They think they're seeing things really, really clearly, but actually they aren't. Usually, it's interesting. There's an article in Harvard Business Review, which we've got a handout of. I don't know if it's been sent out, but I referred to it in my book Results. It's called How Your State of Mind Affects Your Performance. Can we have the previous slide up, Ernesto? Thanks. So, no, that one, yeah. So they asked 750 business leaders in senior executive positions what were the states of mind that drove the highest levels of performance. And what came out was calm, happy, energized. Those were the three states of mind that not only drove the highest levels of performance, but also they seemed to be kind of infectious to the team members and the other people in the organization. When they were asked what were the states of mind that drove the worst performance, the ones that they came out with were frustrated, angry, tired, stressed. And that those two, sometimes they could get very immediate short-term results, but it was almost always at a cost in terms of morale and well-being and wear and tear. And so one of the things I'll often do when I'm speaking with executives is I'll just get this out and I'll say, where are you spending most of your time? Because my assertion to you is that the feeling that you're living in as you go through life is the quality of your life. The experience you're living in is the quality of your life. And what we see is that the more we're able to live in a better feeling for life, the better our impact on others, the better our availability to insight and realization, the better our connection with other people. Now, that's not to say you should be like mood policing yourself or anything like that. What I'm going to suggest to you is that the better you understand how your experience is being created moment to moment, the more you're going to regulate to in the uptrending direction. And this turns out to be pretty much regardless of environment and circumstance. I found this, it was funny, I was coaching someone who he had been a director of Unilever, and he was based in India, and he said he'll never forget it. He was being chauffeured from his apartment to his job, and They were stuck in traffic I think it was in Bombay. And he looked out the window, and at the time he was feeling very miserable and directionless and that sort of thing. He looked out the window and saw a family living on the street, literally in cardboard boxes, having fun and playing and that sort of thing. Now and he just really saw the contrast. Now I'm not making any kind of praise of poverty. I don't see anything valuable in that. But what I'm suggesting is that, and you've probably met them, people who are in all kinds of situations, some of them very, very challenging and very, very difficult, yet whose mood, well-being, state of mind seems largely unaffected by it. And what I'm suggesting is that's there for all of us. In fact, I was working with someone else, and one of the ways that I work with leaders is, and this takes quite a big sell. We do what's called a 3-day intensive. So we get together and spend 3 days one-on-one coaching for 3 days. And my purpose in those sessions is to lead people into a deep embodied understanding of this. And so at the beginning of those sessions, I'll say, what would you love to get from this session? And we'll make like a laundry list of outcomes and that sort of thing. And then we go working on that. And the reason I say it's a big sell is because obviously for anyone who's in a position of leadership and big responsibilities, taking 3 days out of the office to do something like that's a big investment of time and energy and money. So anyway, I'm working with this guy who's CEO of a company, and we get about 45 minutes into the session, and he suddenly gets insecure because he suddenly realizes that he's going to be spending 3 days with me asking him questions and listening to answers, and that he's done it. So he gets kind of freaked out. And so from that slightly freaked out place, which we might call anxious, he starts looking for a solution. So he goes, Jamie, he goes, I'm going to need some kind of formula for how this is going to work, these 3 days. It's a big chunk of time. I'm going to need a formula for how it's going to work. Well, immediately, I start getting freaked out because I haven't brought a formula. I'm like, so I'm getting anxious. I'm like, oh my God, what kind of idiot am I not bringing a formula to a session like this? What am I doing? And then it suddenly occurs to me, where do you believe your experience is coming from? I'm like, oh, it's like, I thought it was coming from what an idiot I was and what I hadn't brought and how I was going to have to make my apologies and send him home and all. I was like, no, you're just experiencing your neurology in the moment. You're just experiencing something that's happening real time. So the moment I realized that, it was like the guy with the ironing board. I just realized it. I went from believing my experience was coming from a horrible teddy bear called damaged reputation and refund and all that sort of thing. It's like, oh no, I'm experiencing something that's coming from within me. Well, instantly my system regulated. And the moment it did, I had one of those good ideas. I said, here's your formula. It just came to me. I said, you plus a misunderstanding equals stuck. Because that was his thing. He was stuck. He was stuck in his business. He wasn't feeling it. He was stuck in his relationship. He was feeling stuck, didn't know what to do. I said, you plus a misunderstanding equals stuck. He's like, oh, I like it. I said, it gets better. See, this guy, he had said to me that earlier in the session, he'd said that when he was a young man, he was very happy-go-lucky and fun-loving and spontaneous and enjoyed himself and all this sort of stuff. And he said that had all gone. He was had the wrinkled forehead. He was very intense. I said, it gets better. He said, you minus a misunderstanding equals clarity, spontaneity, creativity, resilience, insight, realization, all that stuff. In fact, if we can go to the next slide, please, Ernesto. And he was like, that's great, let's go. I ended up boiling that down and putting it in my second book, The Little Book of Clarity. Oh, sorry, the one after that, please, Ernesto. I made a simple equation out of it, which is that you have an innate capacity for all these things, an innate capacity for clarity, resilience, well-being, peace of mind, good ideas, creativity, presence, connection. It's already in there. And the only thing that ever gets in the way is what I call contaminated thinking, which is just we get confused about where our experience is coming from and who we really are. And it's natural and it's normal and it happens to everyone. We all sometimes lose our bearings. But you also have the built-in capacity to bring you back to the moment, bring you back to clarity, bring you back to the truth of your being. And so, yeah, clarity equals capacity minus contamination. So I refer to this as subtractive psychology, which is just a term I coined. Because check this out. How many of you have ever been to a presentation or a talk or read a book or something like that, and you made a ton of good notes because it was full of good ideas, and then you didn't implement any of them? Is it just me? Oh, no, okay. Well, that's because the conscious mind, our intellect, likes additive approaches. That's why the cover of every magazine in the magazine store has, 5 tips to lose weight or to get rich or to find Mr. Right or Ms. Wrong or how to have a beach body or how to cook delicious meals or whatever it is. And it's always 5 tips or 6 or 7, and you read them and you're like, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? And then you don't implement them. Whereas the stuff that makes a difference in your life is the stuff that you realize for yourself from within. Again, not saying that there's not value in external information sources. I get huge value from external information sources. I'm very grateful for many of the things that I've learned. But I'm going to suggest that there's an overlooked superpower you have, which is your innate capacity for realization. And if you open yourself to that, you're going to see the benefits of it showing up in every aspect of your life. At home, at work, in relationships, in health. Because it's one of those things that gives wall-to-wall benefits. And because the nature of understanding is that it generalizes, it's one of those things where you don't need to practice it either. You learn it, and then it self-implements. And you've got examples of this, by the way. When you were born, you didn't know anything about gravity, about the fact of gravity. But you went on a gravity crash course for the first few years of your life. And by the time you were 4, 5, 6 years old, you could run and jump and bounce on beds and climb over things and all that sort of stuff, which requires a deep, embodied understanding of the implications of the fact of gravity. And no one taught you it. No one taught you gravity. You learned it because you have an innate ability to learn from data, to learn from raw data, the data of the truth of life. So that, with gravity, you did that. With germs are invisible. So someone had to show you them, had to make them visible to you, to show you how to hallucinate germs before you could learn from reality about those. So this is more like germs. I'm saying that this is a fact of life. It's already true. It's already there to be seen. And if you see it for yourself, it'll make a big difference to you. My job is to see if I can make it visible to you. So that's what I've been doing here today. I think I'm already over my time, so I'm gonna bring it in for a landing there. But thank you for your attention, and I'd love to have your questions. I know this stuff that I'm saying sounds strange and counterintuitive a lot of the time, so feel free to ask me anything you'd like to know. Thank you.